May I have your attention, please? Before we begin this meeting, I ask that everybody silence your cell phones, please. The Fort Bend ISD Board of Trustees is an open meeting for the public to observe the board conducting district business. Therefore, audience members may address the board during the designated audience items section on the agenda. If you have any printed materials you want to give to the board members, you must provide them to the board secretary, Norma Perez, or to me, and we will provide them to the board. We also ask the members of the audience to be respectful of others, remain quiet during the meeting so that everyone's able to hear the proceedings. For your convenience, microphones have been provided on both sides of the boardroom. Please speak directly into the microphone if you're asked to answer a question or address the board during the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, officer. The time is 6:02 p.m. and this meeting is hereby called to order. We have the presence of a quorum and the meeting has been duly called and notice of the meeting has been posted for the time and manner required by law. Please rise for the pledges of allegiance and remain standing for the silent invocation. Right here. Please remain standing for the silent invocation. You may be seated. Thank you guys. Go back to mommy now, okay? Go back to mommy now, okay? I love you.
Have a fun meeting.
Okay, I will. Thank you, buddy.
Talk to the gathering.
All right. First up on our agenda are our recognitions, and I'm going to take the liberty to honor and just say a few words to the family members of the board members that are here this evening. So I'm going to let Mrs. Grail James start off. Do you want to say something to your husband? I know he's here this evening.
Well, thank you, Jason, for that advance warning on. Now, I'd like to say thank you to my husband, David, who's here tonight, and thank you for supporting me in my role as a trustee, which, despite what some people may think, is not just limited to these hours in these meetings. There's a lot of other things that happen during the week and on the weekends and in the evenings, and I appreciate your support very, very much. I couldn't do it without you.
Thank you, Mrs. James. Did you want to hear Mr. Rosenthal?
Sure. I would like to say good evening to my lovely wife, Joan. And same thing, thank her for allowing me to serve. It's a huge burden on spouses and families as well. But I've appreciated her support over the past 7 years and couldn't do it without her. Thank you.
Mrs. Helliger?
My son is not here today because he's a high schooler, 15-year-old, but I wanted to say publicly thank you for lending his mother out to all the other students and parents and staff here in the district. You know, he gives a lot of his mother not being at home so that I can do this, and I love what I do, and so I want to say that I appreciate him even though he is absent tonight. Thank you so much.
Well, Mary, I'm speaking you through the wonder of modern technology on TV. I appreciate all you do for me, and my advice is to turn off this video after I get done speaking. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Rice. Mrs. Tausan?
Thank you, Mr. Burdine. So I have a few family members tonight. I'm very blessed to be supported by my husband, first and foremost, who can't be here tonight because he's traveling and in Seattle today and working. But I did get a very sweet text from him, and he picks up a lot of slack. Like you said, Addie, my children and my husband allow me to give a lot of myself to Fort Bend ISD, and I appreciate them. I have one daughter here this evening, Hannah. She's my youngest. And my other two are preparing for High School Musical at Ridgepoint. That's a mom plug. If you want to get out and see it, it's going to be great, and it starts this week. So they're doing dress rehearsals and couldn't be here this evening. But I am very honored to have my grandmother, who turns 88 tomorrow, who is here this evening. And has always been a huge supporter. Don't cry, that's not allowed. And my mother and my aunt, Bug, who everybody knows as Aunt Bug, and if you've been to my house and had cookies, she's the one that makes the cookies. And then my brother, Scott, and my nephew, Tyler. Can you say hi? Hi. Who is a kindergartner at Sienna Crossing. So I really appreciate all of you being here, and every single person who's here has stepped up at one time or another and allowed me to serve. And from the bottom of my heart, I want to say thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Taussand. I would like to thank my wife, Andrea, that's here this evening, my daughter, Michaela, and my son, Blake. As everyone has stated, my family sacrifices a lot for us to be here to serve, and I can't thank you enough. You mean the world to me, and I couldn't do this without your support, and thanks for being there for me, and thank you for being here this evening. So, while I have the microphone here, I would like to thank Mrs. James, Mr. Rice, Mrs. Helliger, Mr. Rosenthal, Mrs. Taussand for serving with me. It's a real honor to have a team that we do, and it makes it all possible, and I just wanted to thank you all for being here and doing this. So next up on our agenda here are our recognitions. Dr. Dupree.
Thank you, Mr. Burdine. If the board would join me in front of the dais, we have some outstanding students and staff to recognize this evening.
Board, as you're making your way down, I'd just like to say how very excited we are to have Marshall High School football team here with us this evening. For the first time in school history, the team competed in the Texas State 5A championship game. The team went undefeated in its run to the state title game and finished the season 15-1. As the division runner-up. And I'd like to point out and acknowledge that the loss of a teammate made the end of the season tough for this team. But they stayed strong. Following the final playoff game, the Aledo High School football program sent a football to the Marshall High School team in honor of their teammate, Drew Conley, and we just like to thank our friends in Aledo and their support for us. In just a moment, I'm going to ask Dr. Sanders to come up and introduce some people, but as she's making her way up to the microphone, I'd just like to point out that these students in this team is a great example of what the board-adopted profile of a graduate is come to life. Throughout the season, this team exemplified various characteristics of the profile. They were compassionate citizens as they represented a fellow teammate and his family on the field. They're equipped with skills for life. They exhibited grit and determination. We are very proud of them. We could go on, but I'm going to let Dr. Sanders do the honors of introducing them. Coaches, players, managers, trainers, videographers, I know you're all here. Can you please stand for a round of applause before Dr. Sanders introduces our team captains? Thank you very much. Dr. Sanders, would you introduce us to this amazing group of students from Marshall High School?
Good evening to you all. As I call your name, please join the board at the front for a photo. We'll start off with Coach Williams. Coach Williams is also being recognized tonight for being selected as Coach of the Year by the Houston Chronicle. Next up, in regards to our coaches, we have Coach Lloyd Banks. We have Edwin Harrison, Sam Paget, Toyas Rainey, Cedric Randall, Isaiah Sweeney, and Coach Marcus Washington. In addition to our coaches, we have our team captains. We have Andreas Ortega, Jerry Davis, Corey King, and Dylan Sanchez.
All right, if anyone's taking pictures, let's go ahead and grab them because they are going to get a police escort and head over to Missouri City for the city council meeting in just a few minutes to be recognized. So parents, if you're getting a picture, we're going to squeeze everybody in. Lady board members, you might have to step up a little, yeah. Yeah.
Looking at me first. Thank you. Thank you.
Don't go nowhere, hold on.
Hold on, one or two more. All right, let's get these buffs off to their next celebration. Thank you so much. Congratulations. All right, that was very exciting. And as I mentioned, they are literally getting a police escort on their bus to head over to Missouri City to be recognized. So we're very excited and proud of them. All right, next we have a Group 1 Automotive. We've got some representatives here this evening. I'd like to invite Meredith Wadisek to come forward from our CTE department. She's our director there. Mr. Michael Sullivan, Michael Balsam, and Mike Colvalt from Group 1 Automotive. Gentlemen, if you'll come forward. I'd like to share with you that Group 1 Automotive is partnering with the district for the district's Career and Technical Education Department, and they're going to provide funds to ensure that students in the Transportation, Distribution, and Logistics Automotive program at the new James Reese Center have state-of-the-art technology. So at this time, I think I'd like to turn the program over to them to say a few words.
Thank you. I'll be very brief. First of all, I requested that we have an audience with you in January because it's School Board Appreciation Month. And as a former school board member in Humble, I know all the sacrifices you make, appreciate what you do. The students love you, the faculty loves you, can't do without you. Group 1 Automotive is excited to partner with Fort Bend ISD. We're here today to make a contribution to the auto technology program for $10,000. And it's a, thank you. So y'all have demonstrated, as well as your students have demonstrated, the ability to meet our needs. And we're a growing company, large footprint in Houston. We have about 25 dealerships in the Houston area. Sterling McCall brand up and down Highway 59. I know you wave to our stores when you go by. David Taylor Cadillac. We just opened an Acura store in Sugar Land, brand new. So we'll be hiring people out there as well. So thank you for what you do. I'd like to introduce Mike Koval and Michael Balsam and let them tell you briefly what they do and how important this is to us.
Thank you. Hello, Michael Balsam. It's great to be here. I'll be as brief as I also can. My wife is in teaching and education in Cy-Fair School District, so it's a very big honor for me to watch and observe what's happening here. It's fantastic. I recruit for Group 1 Automotive. I've been in the auto industry many, many years. I think the Oldsmobile Cutlass was Car of the Year back in 19 whatever, okay? So, no, not quite. We are committing financially, sure, but also we want to commit some time to the kids as well. We'll be recruiting and helping kids through some programs as well. And Mike Koval does heavy recruiting for us, which I'm going to introduce now, with technicians. So with that, Mike, I'm more of a soft sell kind of guy, you know what I mean? And Mike does the technicians. Go.
Thanks, Mike. We have a lot of Mikes at Group 1 Automotive, and you got 3 of them here today. Well, the Auto Tech program is one of the greatest career fields for a lot of young men and women to go into, and they don't realize it unless they have a chance to get exposed in their formative years in the high school programs that are available here in this market. And Houston is one of the strongest metro markets in the country in terms of supporting high school students with full 4-year career programs. And when they come out, they'll usually have the opportunity to go right into a dealership with certifications that they receive in high school, or into a 2-year program at one of the secondary professional training organizations such as UTI or Houston Community College, Lone Star. We've got San Jacinto has a big program out on the east side of town, and we got a lot of our folks going from high school into that program and then coming to work with us. But if you give those men and women a chance to get a great career field, they can have it for life, and it's a wonderful opportunity to take care of your family for a long, long time.
Gentlemen, if we can pose for a picture, that would be great. All right, we're going to grab a quick picture.
Yes. Looking over here, please. I'll be taking 2.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Group 1 Automotive. Board, before we move on to the next part of recognition, I know we've got some folks outside who'd like to come in and fill the seat, so we'll just take a quick pause and let some of our audience members who are anxious to come in fill in some of our seats before we move on to the last part of our recognition. Okay, I think we've got a few more seats, and then we're going to go ahead and move forward. Next, for recognition, we're celebrating School Board Recognition Month. And I would like to give the audience a little bit of background on what that is. But in the state of Texas, we celebrate School Recognition Month in January. And like Mr. Burdine said, and recognized our board members, it's a wonderful opportunity in January for us to thank the families who support everything they do. So we thank you for being here this evening, and for the district to say thank you. So we've got a great presentation this evening that we're going to go ahead and start with as soon as we get this last group in. Yeah. All right, we're going to go ahead and move on because we've got some students here that I'd like to introduce. These students helped us with our Pledge of Allegiance, and they've got some great tokens of appreciation. So at this time, I would like to invite, let's see, we are going to start with Samantha Fisher. Miss Fisher, would you please join us? She's from Ronald Thornton Middle School, and she's presenting artwork that was created for Jason Burdine, our board president. Samantha, would you come forward and present the art? Very good. And Samantha also has another piece of art that she's going to present to Miss Addie Helliger, our vice president. Again, this art was personalized for our board members. And I'd like to invite Aiden Hutchins to come forward and present to Mr. Dave Rosenthal, our secretary, his art. Very good. And we have Ariana Ramirez. She will be presenting to Miss Grail James. It's okay. One more. We switch it out. Sorry. That one's really big. Very good. And next we have Brandon Intig, and he's presenting for Mr. Jim Rice. Brandon? Very good. And then Ariana Ramirez also has a piece of art to present to Miss Kristen Tassan. Yay! Thank you, students. And let's give a round of applause to Miss Brenda Tomasello, our art teacher at Thornton Middle School. And now I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Dupree.
I guess I'll use this one. Thank you, Veronica, and thank you, students. Ms. Tomasello, thank you so much for your investment of time and energy in this beautiful artwork for our board. You know, this is my 6th time to stand at this microphone. Can't believe that. Sixth board appreciation years in Fort Bend ISD with this outstanding board. It's looked a little bit different in the early years, but for the 4th year in a row, this is the same board standing in front of me. That says a lot. Yes, it does. That's worthy of a lot of cheering, because they have worked hard together to grow and to build and to lead this district with a mission and a vision that guides my work and our work as a team each and every day. And I'm very proud to stand here as the winner of 2 HEB awards back to back because of their leadership. All the numerous recognitions that this district earns, all the accolades for Fort Bend ISD, we're recognized as a district in the state and nation. And it all begins at the top. And just a few notes I've made that I just think are so important, because some of this has been acknowledged already. But from my seat as superintendent, you know what? They wear me out some days. But I also know they are worn out by the community. because they care deeply about this community. They listen, they invest hours in meetings and phone calls and emails with citizens that they represent, that they speak for as they sit in these seats. And I appreciate all of that because it helps us to do better work together. When we work as a team collectively, it helps all of us to do together. They make personal sacrifices. They miss family events. They miss trips. They do all kinds of things that take them away from their home, away from their own children, from their own spouses on behalf of this community. And yes, they run to do that. They choose to do it. But it doesn't mitigate the fact they're investing hours, hundreds, thousands of hours of time and energy in this important work. Because our community needs and requires trustees who are willing to do what is right and what is best for the students and for this community overall, and they do that. So with that in mind, I just want to say thank you for the partnership and support you provide me. Thank you for being a model of stability and leadership for all other governmental entities, frankly, but most certainly in our community and for all other school boards in the state of Texas. So congratulations and happy Board Appreciation Month. I appreciate you.
All right. Next up on our agenda are our information item, our one information item, attendance boundaries and programming associated with high schools in the southeast portion of the district. Dr. Dupree.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm actually going to just make a few opening remarks. The whole intent of this item this evening is to provide the board an update on our work regarding high school boundaries. As you know, we have, for the last several months, engaged in a community-wide effort to explore boundary possibilities for the southeastern region of the district. This work was initiated initially last year as part of the Facilities Master Plan, where the board asked us to balance enrollment between Ridge Point and Hightower to help manage overutilization, to identify a new high school site in that region of the district, and to include the price of a high school in the 18 bond. Since that time, we have invested a lot of hours in the boundaries. We have been pursuing sites, and we have passed the bond that included funding for the 12th high school in the bond program. Last week at this time, we were sitting before you presenting a recommendation that included boundary changes for Ridge Point High School and Willow Ridge High School and Hightower High School. On the same agenda, we went into closed session and we heard an update from our property brokers and our attorney about a letter of intent that was outstanding, recently issued on a site, an 80-acre site that could serve as the home for our next high school. We came out of closed session with having discussed with the board the idea that we would procure that site immediately and, at their urging, accelerate the construction of High School 12. With that in mind, I will say that I and the staff sitting before you tonight invested probably 24/7 last week for 3 days in a row exploring all the ideas, meeting with architects, attorneys, digging in the data, really exploring what the possibility was of accelerating that high school, what the impact would be, whether it would be necessary to do those boundaries or not, or whether we could bridge to the opening of that school in a new boundary process. So I want to point out that really the pivot point in this whole decision process last week was discussing the new high school and that property purchase. That left us with some new options that were not there before. Some have asked why we have changed course. That is why we changed course. The other thing that was important to us is we wanted to make sure that Ridgepoint High School, the needs of the students at that school are met, and that we're not just saying, oh, we're going to put it out. But so I want you to be aware that the change in position at this point rests in the fact that we knew if we did boundaries right now, there were community concerns about those boundaries for many reasons. Some because we were still leaving 2 schools underutilized. And we had committed to do programming in those schools that we have not gotten to addressing yet. That's on the radar, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more tonight. But there were some communities that we were proposing be moved that would be moved back in 3 or 4 years when the school opened. So we listened to the board's guidance that was not in the best interest for children. We, of course, had listened to a great deal of guidance from the community. So last week was an important week of bringing everything together. So as you know by now, if you're here, we sent a communication last week acknowledging that we have pulled the recommendation, that at this point what we propose is moving forward with the construction of that high school, pending approval of that site on this evening's agenda as it's posted, and then bridging to the next 3 years addressing the growth at Ridgepoint High School. So the most important thing I want the community to hear me say is that we are not abandoning the idea that Ridgepoint needs attention. We understand that, and we're going to immediately begin putting together options for that and convene community focus groups in that community so that the community is well aware, informed, and has a voice in these solutions. So we're also going to be engaging programming steering committees in both the Willow Ridge and Marshall feeder patterns to immediately engage the community into unique communities, one for Marshall, one for Willow Ridge, to begin that important work so that we can immediately, within the next year or 2, begin implementing additional programs for students in those feeder patterns. As you know, also on tonight's agenda is the recommendation to consider early college, high school, and P-TECH in Hightower, Marshall, and Willow Ridge. And we believe those are solid offerings for the students. We believe they're important offerings, but we know we need more. And so what I'm going to do now is stop talking, and I'm going to let Oscar Perez, our Chief Operations Officer, speak to the schedule that would be involved for getting that High School 12 open in the 2022 school year. And then he's going to be followed up by Dr. Joe Rodriguez, our Chief of Schools, and Diana Saavedra, our Chief Academic Officer, to discuss programming at the high schools, as I've mentioned, and some preliminary discussions about addressing growth at Ridgepoint High School. Oscar?
Thank you, sir. As Dr. Dupree stated, Bond 2018 included High School 12, and it was planned for an opening in the school year 24-25. That was based on the availability of land. We still didn't have land secured, and was also based on a competitive seal proposal method that the district has been utilizing. Since we met last week, as Dr. Dupree said, we have gone ahead and secured land, and it is actually on the agenda tonight for this board to act upon. We also looked at ways of bringing this project back and opening it early. And as we met with the architect, with my staff, we looked at different methods. And the method that'll get us where we need to go is if we come back to this board and request to be able to look at CMAR, which is Construction Manager at Risk. And what this does, it allows us to go ahead and start design, bring in a contractor, and we can all work in parallel. And depending on how the project is moving forward, we could actually have some early packages for site work, for foundation. So in working with the architect, we have been able to determine that if we utilize this method to go forward, that we will be able to deliver a building in 2022. And so Once again, it's a tight schedule. Upon y'all's action, we would go ahead and get with the developer who has already given us preliminary agreement to allow us to start our feasibility study in tandem with their feasibility study, so we gain some time there. And then, you know, once again, some of the things we don't control, obviously, is Mother Nature. But if everything works right, we will be able to deliver a building. If not, we also are going to be planning this design so that it can be opened up in phases if we need it to. So as we design it, we're going to make sure that the utilities are coming in from the right directions, that we actually have milestones within the building where we could cut off and finish and get a certificate of occupancy and be able to occupy. So I feel very confident that we can deliver in 2022.
As Dr. Dupree mentioned regarding Ridge Point High School, there is going to be a focus group that is going to convene, and the conversations are going to revolve around how to effectively manage student growth at Ridge Point High School. The focus for the group is going to be how do we manage effectively while we are also ensuring the safety of the students, reducing the overcrowding that we have at some of the core areas, and of course, how do we minimize the disruption in the learning environment? The other focus of the group is also going to be, coming up with creative ideas in regards to staffing. Obviously, flexible scheduling has to be something that is considered as well, and the option for offering, school choice. Is that one of those innovative ideas that needs to be considered? So the focus group is going to really come together and come up with the ideas and assist administration with what does the next phase look like. The other part that's going to impact Ridge Point High School, and actually all high schools, is going to be the opening of the Reese CTE Center. The opening of that center is going to assist with the building utilization at all the high schools. When it comes to Ridge Point High School, it's going to have a positive effect because obviously we're going to have students that are going to be attending the Reese Center. When it comes to innovative programming at Marshall and Willow Ridge, I will be leading the focus group at Marshall High School and the Marshall High School feeder pattern. Dr. Indelicato will be leading the group at Willow Ridge High School and that feeder pattern. The focus is once again going to be on innovative programming and what does that look like. As we've previously mentioned, we need to do a better job with community partnership. We've done a great job with engaging the community, and as has been stated before, we can improve when it comes to partnering with the school community. As today, I spent countless hours with some of the members of the Marshall feeder pattern, and we have already come up with innovative programming. And that's that we haven't even assembled a group yet. But I have had conversations with people in the community, and there is a need and there is a want for innovative programming for all the other students. Early College High School is one of the programs. We've been having conversations regarding how that is phase one. Phase two is what does it look like next for all the other students at Marshall High School. And the expectation is going to be that at Willow Ridge High School, that focus group is going to have the same type of conversations. So our plan is to come forward and to present innovative programming for those two feeder patterns in the near future.
As Dr. Rodriguez indicated, one of the goals that we want to accomplish in the work that we're doing is really to align programming from K through 12 in those feeder patterns. So the focus groups will not only focus on the end goal in terms of what we want the opportunities to be at the high school level, but we'll also explore what does that look like at the elementary level, how does that feed into the middle school, and how do these programs build upon each other so that our students develop a readiness level and they're excited about the programming that they can walk into at the high school level. Obviously, the program plan is to offer those options to students outside the feeder pattern as well. And so we'll be mindful of the zone students as well as generating interest from students outside the feeder pattern.
I think that concludes our remarks. We'd be open to any discussion or conversation with the board.
Mrs. James?
Thank you, Mr. Burdine. And thank you for that update, Dr. Dupree. I have some questions about the finances on this. I have a few questions, but one of my questions is about, can you, Mr. Bassett, give us an indication about the impact on the M&O budget of opening a new high school? Let's start there.
So the fixed cost for opening a new high school is going to be between $4 and $4.5 million.
Okay, so $4 to $5 million, and that's a year of operating expense of all the personnel, the teachers, and all.
Well,
of
the
that.
teachers follow the students, so that's more of the fixed positions, like the orchestra teachers, others that are fixed, nurse, counselor, all of those. It was about $2.5 million to give you some perspective on middle school, for example, which we just opened.
Okay. So that's good. Thank you for that. And then what about in terms of our debt service? Have we done any analysis of our the tax impact on this by accelerating the high school?
We're still crunching those numbers. I mean, accelerating it could cause our rate to go up an additional penny earlier than planned, but we're still working on that.
Okay, so I guess I'd kind of like to see that because my experience has shown me that sometimes we have unintended consequences when we make decisions. So I guess I'm curious as to what the tax impact would be by accelerating this.
Yes, ma'am.
This schedule, and I think that's important for the board to understand, and I think it's important for the community to understand as well. So if you can get us that information, that would be great. Okay, then let's talk a little bit about the programming. So I heard, I guess this is essentially the do nothing option. And to be honest, I have some reservations about the do nothing option. So I guess I just want to understand a little bit more. You talked about Ridge Point High School, and right now we know it's a little bit, it's overcrowded, maybe at 108, 110% of the design capacity. So what does that look like on a daily basis, and what kind of impact are the students having? Can you just touch on that a little bit?
As far as currently at Ridge Point High School at this point in time?
Yeah. I mean, because you talked about some, getting together focus groups and design teams and working on plans. And so I know that takes some time. So I just understand the situation now, and then maybe a little bit about the situation going forward, what you would expect, maybe a timeline.
All right. Well, so it's going to be dependent on who you ask. There have been many conversations, and there's been information provided to us that Ridge Point is just overcrowded, and students are having trouble, walking through the hallways. We've had conversations with other individuals that say, that in their opinion, Ridge Point is crowded, but it's not at a point where they felt that it was overcrowded and that their child was complaining. So we've had two different conversations. What I can tell you is it is crowded. It is. I mean, for someone to say that it's not, that would be a lie. So that is why we're at a point where we do need to bring in members from the Ridge Point High School community, and we need to generate some ideas. We have some ideas. We do. We believe that just by implementing flexible scheduling, that in itself could benefit the students. But we also know, based on the conversations we've had, we've been receiving great feedback, and we've been generating ideas from other people, parents, community members that have said, have you thought about this? Have you thought about plan B, plan C? So at that point, that is where we felt it was important, it was critical that we engage not only as a district administration or a campus administration, but that we bring in community members to assist us. So that is where the preliminary thoughts are. We know we will probably need additional staff. We've had conversations about portables, obviously flexible scheduling, but that's going to be the focus of that group, is to generate additional ideas that we may have missed or we haven't thought of as of today.
Okay, so thank you for sharing that. So I just want to share, you know, I could ask a lot of questions, but I think I'm just going to jump right to the point. And I have some concerns about the lack of any change here. And one of the concerns is the board voted on a recommendation to balance the enrollment at Ridgepoint and Hightower, and that was part of a series of recommendations, and I feel like that recommendation has been put aside, and we're not doing anything about it. And what I hear is, well, we're going to try this, and we're going to have a focus group, and we're going to try to get some input, and we're going to do flexible scheduling, and you know, there's a lot of other things that have come out. Or you know, I've heard rumors, capping enrollment, you know, overflow campuses, things like that. And those are all good, and you know, or maybe they're not good, but I just have a concern about it because I feel like the board said we wanted to balance enrollment between Hightower and Ridgepoint, and I didn't see a recommendation that did that. I saw a recommendation that came to us last week that maybe put a little dent in that, but it actually didn't do what the board had asked to be done. So I'm frustrated by this scenario that we're in right now because there were a lot of reasons that the board put forward that balancing. One was to deal with overcrowding at Ridgepoint in the short term. Another one was to manage our finances well in terms of both our M&O budgets and our debt service budgets. But there was also a conversation about the artificial barrier of Highway 6 between the Ridgepoint and Hightower feeder patterns, and we talked about how we felt we wanted to break that down and utilize our buildings in the best way. So, and there are many other things that I could talk about. I think those are kind of the primary ones that we discussed back in the summer. So I personally feel disappointed that we're in this situation. I recognize that we had an extensive community engagement effort. But I would also like to recognize that many of the options, there were 4 options that were put to the community, and many of them touched multiple schools. They were not focused on just Hightower and Ridgepoint, and I recognize there may have been some reasons for that. I don't know. I did not delve into it. I let the organization do its work. But the recommendation that came to us didn't balance enrollment. It focused primarily on Hightower and Ridgepoint, but I feel like we sort of lost the point of what we were trying to do. And I'm frustrated with the process because I know a tremendous number of community members put a tremendous amount of time into giving feedback. I know staff put a tremendous amount of time. I personally invested time in trying to learn the options and study them and look at the impact and study feeder patterns and things like this. But I'm just disappointed. I'm disappointed in our process, and I'm disappointed that the board's recommendation that we made over the summer is not being addressed.
I'd like to respond to some of your concerns, Mrs. James. I think what I would say is I would agree with you that it's always frustrating when we undergo a very lengthy process and end up with what seems like maybe nothing happening. I would not, in my view, I wouldn't frame this as the do nothing option because I think we're doing a great deal. And our goal, as you mentioned, was to really engage with the community. And again, we value the board's perspective as we come up with our final, where we're headed as a staff. And we always want to work in unity with the board. I do want to address, though, the facilities master plan recommendation the board approved, because in my view, that recommendation, it all depends on how you look at the facilities master plan. Historically, in our facilities master plan, it has been a framework for planning. This, in my decision, is no different than back in 2014 when the board approved the addition at, for example, First Colony Middle School. But new information emerged, and we ended up not doing that at the staff's recommendation. So to me, this is a very similar example. A year ago when we got to this point of that recommendation, it seemed like the right course. We've now changed things. Things look different, and we believe that it's worth setting that part of it aside. And again, that's my position as the superintendent. I would also add, though, I mean, we have been very intentional on tonight's agenda. Number one, to include an agenda item that allows the board to make action on any recommendation they see fit. We addressed one specific one last night, but the board asked a number of questions, last week, but the board asked many, many questions. And we've provided the board extensive detail, including a truly balanced scenario between Ridgepoint and Hightower only. And the reason we did that is because it's always the board's option to do what they think is best if they want to set aside my recommendation. So that's why we left that on the agenda for action this evening if the board saw fit to do something different. And certainly it's always the board's prerogative to take something differently in the future if they choose to do that. So I think what we've tried to do, this has been a complex process, a complex decision. I will tell you, I agree, we need a new process, and I'm already talking to other superintendents in large, fast growth districts about the future, about our future process, about how we can be more partnered with the community when it comes to this, rather than simply consulting with them, but truly partnering with them to do the work. So, I mean, I share with you some of the frustration. I think we can all feel that. But in the end, I feel like we've arrived at a point that the community is generally pleased. Again, not 100%. We'll never have 100% delight by everybody. But I think we've reached a good point where we can move forward with a good plan.
Thank you, Mrs. James. Mrs. Helliger.
Thank you, Ms. Burdine. Thank you, Dr. Pree and staff for your updates. I've got a couple comments that I wanted to make. I guess I'll start with Mrs. James' comments. First, I think that I agree with you that our recommendations or our ask was not answered. However, I don't think this is a do-nothing option. It's important to me, based on the conversation that we had last Monday, that we take everything into consideration when making the decisions around balance and enrollment between Ridgepoint High School, Hightower High School, Willow Ridge, Marshall High School. We cannot, me personally, I don't think we can do this in a vacuum with just lines of where people live. We have to look at programming. And through the conversation that we had on Monday as well as throughout the weeks, it was clear to me that if we make a decision, me personally, if we make a decision hastily and not really looking at everything holistically, we're going to be in a situation where we're going to be continue to move kids. And I want to prevent that. And I know you do too. So to me, I would hope that we would take a step back. I look at this more as a step back, say, whoa, put my boots on, as the young lady made for me. Put our boots on and really take a holistic look into how we really approach this. And thankful we have an opportunity to accelerate the high school option, which will definitely also make it provide us alternative options that we have been provided earlier. I do want to make sure that as we look at programming, I think Mr. Rodriguez, you talked about getting into with the community. I spoke to a lot of the community members, and the only concern that I really have is around their understanding of the programs that we're doing, and especially around the early college, high school, at Marshall High School. The feedback that I'm getting is that they understand what's coming, but they don't understand the details around it to really accept it as a program that is beneficial to them as a school and as a community. Understanding what the differences are between the programs that we have that we're projecting for Willow Ridge and Hightower versus the one we're trying to put at Marshall High School. Just that understanding, and to me, that's one of my biggest concerns, is because we don't want to make decisions with people feel like we're just pushing something down their throats, that they're going to have to do this. it has to be a partnership. And so I just wanted to make sure that we're doing that and we've got a plan to communicate what we're doing. And if we need to make some changes, we can have that flexibility to make those changes.
Yeah, if I can respond to that, that'd be great. You know, and I appreciate you sharing those comments. And this is what's going to be extremely beneficial to us as a school district. Is that was one of the recommendations that came from one of the individuals that will be on the committee. You know, during our first meeting, she suggested, and she basically said, she's like, the ask is going to be that you, Dr. Rodriguez, speak to the Marshall community and start from the foundation and ensure that we all understand what early college high school truly means for our community. So, you know, exactly what you said is something that has already been suggested to me. And at this point in time, we will be working on a date and a time in which I'm going to go back and I'm going to go ahead and ensure that everybody in the community that does attend the meeting, that they understand early college high school and the difference between that program and, of course, P-TECH.
Thank you. And not only a meeting, I think we also do, maybe would helpful if we do some type of mail out, some type of PR really around it so that it gets a broader footprint of people in that community.
Thank you, Mrs. Helliger. Mr. Rice.
Thank you, Mr. Burdine and Mrs. James and Mrs. Helliger for your comments, and also Dr. Dupree. I appreciate the fact that we're in a very dynamic situation, and Fort Bend ISD has been growing ever since my wife and I moved here in 1981. And that means things change. They don't always stay the same, and so we have to be flexible. We have to adapt to changing times and changing growth areas, and we've got certain neighborhoods that are aging in place and certain new neighborhoods that are growing very fast. So I think, and I appreciate your comments, Dr. Rodriguez, about we've acknowledged that we've made some missteps in engaging the community. We were attending a TASB Exceptional Governance conference in Austin a couple of weeks ago. Mrs. James, Mrs. Tasson, Mr. Burdine, Dr. Dupree, and Mrs. Hayliger and I. And the big takeaway was to engage with the community, but to partner with the community. And that's what you've been talking about tonight, and you've already gotten some good ideas from that. So I appreciate your leadership in that area, and I'm very optimistic about some of the things that you've already described. I would also like to say that for the last 8.5 years, Fort Bend ISD has been fiscally responsible. We passed a bond. We know it's going to have an impact on the INS debt service. We know that we need the high school in Ridge Point as quickly as we can get it, and we've known that since before we even passed the bond. We know that when students move here, it has an impact on the M&O tax rate, and we plan for that, and we move forward accordingly. And it doesn't mean that everything just falls into place neat and sweet with we don't ever have to break a sweat. We do, and we have demonstrated that. And we've received the comptroller's 5-star rating for fiscal responsibility every single year I've been on the school board. 5-star, not 4, not 3, not 2, 5. And our Standard & Poor's AA+ bond rating is a testament to the fact that the financial strength of the district is stronger than battery acid. So I applaud you. I'd like to move forward, and thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Mr. Rice. Mrs. Tossan.
Thank you, Mr. Burdine. So I appreciate the comments here and the questions. I have spent a lot of time the last several weeks studying all of this and the literally hundreds of emails we have gotten, literally hundreds. And I have read almost all of them. I can't say I have read all of them. And I know that my colleagues have done a lot of the same because whether we get time to respond to them or not, we read them and we take your feedback into consideration. So I just wanted to say that at the outset. I agree with you, Ms. Hulliger. I feel the same way. I think that one of the things that gave me pause about the rezoning was that we've talked for the last several years that I've been on a board about being strategic in